Welcome to this installation of Mrs. Russo's 6th grade life science. Today we're going to talk about biodiversity and extinction. We've already talked about Darwin's theory of evolution, and now we're moving on to biodiversity and extinction. So how do new species form? Well, if you'll recall from previous lessons that a species is a group of organisms that can mate and reproduce with each other and produce offspring that can also mate and reproduce. When a group of individuals remain isolated from the rest of its species long enough to evolve different traits that prevent reproduction between these groups, then these two species kind of separate and form new species. And since the groups can no longer reproduce with one another, they are considered different species. So what factors affect biodiversity? Well, biodiversity is the number of different species in an area. And the factors that affect biodiversity in an ecosystem include area, climate, genetic diversity, and diversity of niches. And area is referring to an organism's or species' living space or habitat. And here we have 3 examples of habitats. And the next is climate. Climate also affects biodiversity. And we have 3 examples of 3 very different climates. One is cold and icy, the other is hot and dry, and the other is warm and tropical. And genetic diversity can also affect biodiversity. Diverse traits such as color, size, and etc. These are just a couple of examples of genetic diversity. This group of dogs here, these are all one species, but look at all the diversity. Lots of genetic diversity. And also in our pepper plants down here, we've got lots of different traits in these plants which are controlled by genes. In other words, genetic diversity. And a very important factor which determines the amount of biodiversity an ecosystem can have is diversity of niches. And you'll remember that a niche is an organism in its habitat and kind of how it makes its living. Like what it does to survive, what kind of food it eats, where it lives within its ecosystem. This is its niche. What is its role within the ecosystem? And 2 of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet are the coral reef system and the tropical rainforest. And these are one of the reasons that they're able to have so much biodiversity is because of how many different niches there are within that environment. Okay, so how do species become extinct? Well, extinction is when members of a species disappear from Earth. And it's important to understand that extinction is a natural process that usually happens gradually. However, scientists think that extinction rates have increased recently due to human activity. And extinction usually occurs when a species is unable to adapt within its changing environment. So something happens within the environment that changes, whether it's temperature or availability of food. Something happens that changes the environment, and the species has to either have adaptations that help it survive, they have to be able to adapt to that change, or they die. And there are different levels, or different, stages on the road to becoming extinct. And first, a species becomes threatened. And a threatened species is a species that can become endangered in the future. And then an endangered species is one that is in danger of becoming extinct. And we're going to have a couple of examples of each of these. And again, threatened species are species that are in danger of becoming endangered. And so we've got our red panda, our black rhino, and our polar bear. The polar bear is very close to becoming an endangered species. And you'll recall, endangered species are species that are in danger of becoming extinct. And these include our orangutan, the lowland gorillas, and elephants. And it's hard to imagine our planet without these majestic creatures. And this is a very sad representation of extinction of a species. The end is near, and this is the end of this presentation. So I hope that you've taken something valuable from this presentation and maybe be inspired to make a change in this planet to help preserve some of these species and to learn more about conservation. Thanks for watching.